Welcome into the install with Greg Cosell of NFL Films. We had a week off, corporate holiday, but it's good to be back. Good to see Greg. Good to talk some ball. We are right in the middle of the AFC East, which Greg honestly is one of the most interesting divisions in football this year.
Oh, without question. I mean, the Bills have won it for a number of years, and they obviously are still a very good team, although they have some meaningful changes, which we'll discuss. Obviously, the Dolphins get people excited. Tua led the NFL in passing yards a year ago. They certainly have an explosive offense. They have some changes on defense, including their coordinator. And the Jets, I mean, they're probably one of the most intriguing teams. We don't really know what they are, but they're certainly intriguing. And then there's New England, which it will be interesting to see, I guess, when they decide that they want to play Drake May. I mean, I'm pretty certain when you look at their schedule that they probably don't want to put him out there for at least a month or so. But, barring anything unforeseen, they're probably going to lose a few more than they win. And normally that leads to the young quarterback getting an opportunity, particularly when he's the third pick in the draft.
Yeah, and Jacoby Brissett, who's played some good football in his career, is a quality kind of gap year type of player in these situations, and is somebody who obviously they're familiar with, having drafted him out of NC State, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Who've always put out great quarterbacks.
Yeah.
I mean, Phillip Rivers gets all the headlines, but they always have quality players out of there. Anyway, we're not here to do NC State quarterback talk. We're here to talk Buffalo Bills, and certainly Josh Allen was not a player who played major college football that way, but one of the highest level players in the NFL. And continuing, in the same way that we talk about Mahomes, and you're always learning new things in any line of work, quarterback, broadcast, analyst, whatever the case may be. But Josh Allen, and continuing the development as the quarterback, the most well-rounded version of him that he can be, in the same way that we've talked about with Pat Mahomes over the past couple of years, Greg. It's been so fascinating to watch him try and put it all together and do so really, really successfully at times. I wanted to start though with the coordinator change that they made in the middle of last season, and just kind of get your perspective on how things changed, or what they were doing with Ken Dorsey, and then how things changed when they ultimately went to Joe Brady, who returns as the OC this year.
Yeah. Well, let's focus on Brady, since he's the guy, and now they have the whole off season.
Sure.
I think one thing that a lot of people have to understand is even really good quarterbacks and great quarterbacks, we could probably put Allen in today's NFL in the great category. But we know Mahomes is the best, but Allen is certainly in most people's minds would probably be 2, 3, on the list, after that. But every great player wants to continue to get better at what they feel they need to get better at, and every coach wants to keep working with a quarterback. I guarantee Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are working on things this offseason and into training camp. So I think one of the things that Joe Brady is going to try to do with Josh is, yes, he's phenomenal making plays outside of the structure of the play call and the play design. The phrase a lot of people are now using is above the X's and O's. But Josh still needs to be better. And when I say better, more consistent. It's not as if he can't do it. That's not the point. But more consistent, playing within the structure and delivering the ball for those kinds of sustaining throws. Now, he's had games where he's been phenomenal at that. But my guess is that Joe Brady is going to try to get Josh Allen to just be a little quicker with his processing and with his eyes, so that the ball can come out and that they can stay within structure. Because I watched every Josh Allen drop back since he's been in this league, and he's a fun watch, no question, Buck. But there's always a few plays where he prematurely leaves the pocket and leaves throws on the field that are there. Now, because he's so special on making plays outside the pocket, we just assume that's a wonderful thing when he gets outside the pocket. But those plays don't happen all the time, Buck. There are plays that are never seen where he leaves the pocket prematurely and it ends up being a bad play. And when I say bad play, I don't mean a turnover or fumble, maybe it's an incompletion that he throws the ball away where he should have had a completion. And I know that Joe Brady and staff will be working on that, just to get Josh playing with a little more refined sense of timing and rhythm. And by the way, that will prolong his career as well, because then he won't be leaving the pocket as much. And you know, you never want to take away his ability to make special plays. So it is a balance. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's something they will be working on.
Yeah, it's so much fun to watch him make those plays that I think a lot of football fans just casually get caught up in the moment
Yes,
where he goes, where I think Bomani Jones at ESPN or formerly at ESPN has called him Dennis the Menace. He just goes full menace mode out there, and because he's bigger, faster, stronger, he can still have some of that, bleep it Wyoming to his game that allows him to be that physically overwhelming
right.
still in the NFL. But trying to continue to refine those skill sets as you've articulated there, is the thing that Joe Brady is going to have to work to accomplish. Joe Brady's career as a coordinator is interesting. I know what a phenomenon he was as a college coach coming out of LSU, and it didn't quite go the way he probably anticipated in his first job, if I remember the Carolina
Carolina.
Panthers in the NFL. But getting the opportunity to work with a quarterback like Josh Allen is going to be great for both
Well, just
coaching
one
staff
quick
and
point, if
player.
I could. Before he went to LSU, where obviously they had Burrow, they had Jefferson, they had Chase, they had Edwards-Helaire. I mean, they had a lot of talent, obviously. He was with the New Orleans Saints for, I think, 2 years prior to LSU. So when I talk about the timing and rhythm, he was exposed, obviously, in a detailed way to the Sean Payton offense, which is solely based on timing and rhythm. So, don't forget, you know what every coordinator wants to do when they call a pass play? They want the quarterback to be able to throw to the primary receiver. Now, that doesn't always happen. Obviously, we know that. But that's what you're trying to do, because that then allows him to play within timing and rhythm. Now, there are many things that go into having that happen, and we're not going to go into all those details now, but that's what you're trying to do. No one wants the quarterback to drop back and feel like, okay, what am I looking at now? I got to go to, no, no, no. Yeah. They want it to go to the primary. Now, the really great quarterbacks, and I was actually speaking today with a quarterback who played in the league, who visited me. We were watching tape today, who's not in the league right now, but played in the league. And he was talking about the fact that the really great quarterbacks, you want to get to the point where you pretty much know what you're getting before the ball snapped. Now, again, doesn't happen all the time, but that's what you're trying to get your quarterback to.
Well, to that point, Will Levis was actually talking about that the other day. I think you were on that same show on 3HL when they had him in studio for
Yeah, I
about an
was. Yeah,
hour.
yeah.
He had given an answer about how it's almost not too easy, but basically that the answers are so defined, all you have to do is execute. But you almost overthink it sometimes because the answer is so clear to you right away in the scheme or what
And
they're
that's what
trying
you
to
want.
accomplish in the scheme.
You hear offensive coaches talk all the time about answers. And one of the things I learned from a coach who'd been in the league for years and years and years and has coached great quarterbacks is one thing you try to find out with a young quarterback, and Levis is clearly a young quarterback. Maybe it seems in Tennessee like he's been around forever now, but he's a young quarterback with not even a full season of starts under his belt. So you as a coach, as a coordinator, as a quarterback coach, you want to find out how he can get to the answers. You can provide answers in the meeting room on the iPad, but once the game starts, you have to have a feeling of, hey, can he find the answers? And not every quarterback can do that to the same level, Buck, to the same degree. So you have to find out how comfortable you are with your quarterback finding the answers on his own.
It is inexperienced, young still at 25, Greg, but
Inexperienced, probably
inexperienced
better word. Yes,
because he is an older player. I think he's older than Trevor Lawrence, honestly,
he probably
ironically
is.
enough,
Yeah.
after the transfers from Penn State. But either way, with the Bills in particular, the skill positions have obviously changed there
Yes.
in Buffalo with Stephon Diggs being traded to the Houston Texans. He comes to the AFC South, which is one of the more fascinating transactions we talked about earlier this offseason. Curtis Samuel, who is a proven wide receiver, the former Washington Commander. Keon Coleman, who they draft in the second round this year, who's got a big personality. We'll find out what he is as a pro here in not too far, in the not too distant future. And then Khalil Shakur, I believe is how I pronounce the last name, the former fifth-round pick as their wide receiver core. Now, obviously, Dalton Kincaid is very heavily involved in that offense, Greg. But the collection of skill talent that they had versus what they'll be working with now is one of the bigger questions, I think, anywhere in the NFL offseason.
Yeah, it'll be different. And it'll be an interesting mix between lining up in 11 personnel with 3 wide, and they're obviously counting on Coleman to be a meaningful factor. We have no idea target volume or number of catches, but clearly be a meaningful factor in their pass game. Samuel, you can move him around. Shakir, you can move him around. Those are 2 guys that have location versatility within an offense. But I think they also want to line up in 12 personnel. Kincaid is obviously a really good receiver. I would expect more from him again. Not speaking about target share, but they still have Dawson Knox, who's a solid tight end as well. So there'll be an interesting mix between 11 personnel and 12 personnel. James Cook is a perfect back for their offense because even though he'll probably get around 200 carries, give or take, they don't really. He's not a primary back in the sense that, let's say, Derrick Henry was a feature foundation back.
Right.
So Cook works really well there because clearly the foundation of the offense is Josh Allen. So Cook fits that really, really well. They did draft, and I'm sure you're familiar with Ray Davis, who started at Vandy and ended up, I believe, at Florida, was it?
No, Kentucky.
No, Kentucky, excuse me. He had the big game against Florida.
Mhm.
Right. He ended against Kentucky. I was thinking about when I was watching his tape, he had that 200+ yard game against Florida.
Right.
And Davis he's more of a grinder than James Cook. So he kind of fits the mold if you want to have a back that can get those sustaining hard yards inside. Not that Cook can't run inside, but that's not really who he is. So it really depends a lot on the wide receivers. The O-line, there'll be one change because they lost Mitch Morse, but for the most part, the O-line is together.
On the defensive side of things, Bobby Babich is the coordinator there over this particular defense. And of course, Sean McDermott is I believe he's still calling plays defensively.
I guess we'll find out, but clearly it's Sean's defense.
Yeah, and that was the case last year as well, where just injuries wrecked them at various points throughout the course of the season, Greg, and they still managed to put together a cohesive unit, which speaks to not just the players, but the ability, the job that the coaching staff did as well. They also turn over a fair amount of parts and pieces on this defense, though Von Miller is still there. I guess let's talk about the defense that McDermott runs first and foremost before we talk about the parts that they'll try to operate it with.
Yeah, they play a lot out of 2 shell split safety coverage. That's kind of the way Sean likes to play it, whether it's some form of quarters 4 across or some combination of quarters and cover 2. They do play a lot of cover 2. They predominantly rely on a 4-man pass rush. It's not as if they do not blitz. Clearly they do, but they're more of a 4-man pass rush team. A lot of their pressures come from what we call sim pressure, meaning it's still a 4-man rush, but they'll drop a D lineman out and add in either a linebacker or a defensive back as the 4th rusher. They'll get Matt Milano back from the injury last year. He's one of the 3 or 4 most complete linebackers in the NFL, so that's a big return for them. I think the question they have, maybe it's not a question, but they still have Rasul Douglas, who's going to play one corner. They have Bedford, who's probably going to play the other corner. I'm really curious to see if Kair Elam, who did come from Florida and was their first-round pick in 2022, who's got traits out the window, has never really become a player yet. But this might be his last chance. But he's got traits. They'll be a little different at safety. In fact, they'll have 2 new safeties.
A lot different at safety.
Yeah. They signed Mike Edwards from Kansas City. Really solid safety. Been in the league a number of years. Another Kentucky player. And Cole Bishop, one of my favorite players in the 2024 draft. It would not surprise me if he ends up being one of the starting safeties. He fits what they want, Buck, what Sean wants, in that he can play in the box. He can line up as a kind of an overhang player outside the box. He can play on the deep end. He can kind of do it all as a safety in terms of his versatility.
The safety discussion, Greg, just it makes me so interested that it's as flush still with free agents. I know we didn't plan to do any kind of free agent discussion today, but there's still a ton of veteran safety help out there right now. And obviously, you know, we're in the off period, the 6 weeks off period in the NFL season. But
I know Justin Simmons is still out there.
Titans fans are as thirsty for Justin Simmons because they got everything else they wanted on their Christmas
But there's
list
got to
this
be a
year.
reason for that, which we obviously, you know, I mean, we could name the 3 or 4 reasons why. We don't know the specific reason why.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, we can assume, or rather, you could assume that it's got something to do with the financials, but that's not
Yeah, I
something that we have
mean,
the
depending
information
on
to
what he's
speculate.
asking, and that number with each passing day is likely to start coming down. You know, although maybe he just decided, you know what, I'm waiting, and that's just the way it's going to be. You know, you never know.
No, truly. And then a team like the Chargers signs Tony Jefferson to come and play in their defense after a couple years out of football, and you know, the thing just keeps on rolling. It's always interesting to see how
Which is a
teams.
really fascinating signing. Obviously, they got him, I'm sure, for the minimum, and
Yeah.
Justin Simmons is not going to get the minimum, but we'll find out. You know, Titans fans, I'm sure, would love to see Justin Simmons in that uniform, but maybe there's something we don't know.
Well, I just quickly, Greg, on Justin Simmons as a player in this defense, you know, because God knows by the next time we meet, there may be a transaction. So I'd
Right.
rather do this preemptively than not. Justin Simmons is a fit in the style of defense that Denard Wilson would want to run coming over from the Denver Broncos.
Yeah.
At where he's been so successful in his career, where his ability to capitalize on turnovers is the thing that you hear cited the most. But what is he as a player, and what are his strengths and weaknesses?
Yeah. I mean, Justin Simmons has been, and I can't sit here and say I studied him in detail the last half of the season.
Sure.
Well, but what he's been is an interchangeable safety who can play on the back end, can play in the box, can match up to tight ends at times. I mean, he's been kind of a full service safety. Like I said, I don't know whether teams, in studying him in detail far more than I have, so I'm just being honest,
Mm.
feel that he's declined. I don't know the answer, or whether it's a money issue, but you know, right now we know Amani Hooker's a good football player. Elijah Molden, as we speak today, is probably the other safety, and I think we'd have to say on you know, in late June before training camp starts, that is you know, to be nice, a work in progress. We don't know how that's going to play out. So, you know, you would think that if Justin Simmons still has, in the minds of the people who really study him in greater detail than I, still can play at a reasonably high level, that someone would want to sign him. And I'm sure he'll end up playing somewhere, and we have no idea what that'll be. You know, again, someone could get hurt too. So, but it's a question, I think, for the Titans right now, Molden at safety. I liked Molden when he came out of school. He played safety, he played slot corner. He won't play slot corner here, obviously. That'll be McCreary, but it's a question.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll continue talking about AFC East teams when we meet next Wednesday, Greg. I think since we're doing the TMZ element of it, let's do a little New York Jets and
Oh, all
talk
right.
about the the system and the player, and how much the player is the system based on how things went in New York last year. But it's
It's
always
kind of the
good to.
way when you have veteran quarterbacks who are supers. I remember somebody, a coach, had know really well, who'd been in the league forever, telling me about Peyton Manning when he was, you know, after he was Peyton Manning and been in the league, you know, 12 years. He said, if you go in as a new offensive coordinator, you're running Peyton Manning's offense.
That's absolute, by the way, as it should be in the
Right,
case
right,
of Peyton
right,
Manning, and probably Aaron Rodgers too.
right,
But
right.
always good to catch up with you, Greg, and look forward to talking shop again next week.
Thanks, Buck. Appreciate it.